Hello, everyone, and welcome to the NCAPPS February webinar. I see the participants are streaming in. We are glad to see you here. We will get started in just about 30 seconds. All right, so my name is Bevan Croft. I am one of two co-directors of the National Center on Advancing Person-Centered Practices and Systems. Let's go to the next slide, Connor. We're glad that you can be here for our February webinar titled Building Capacity Using Family-Centered Approaches to Promote the Best Life for Young Children with Disabilities, an innovative family-to-family program. We're very excited about this webinar. We've been putting it together for some time, and I've been looking forward to this day for quite some time. Just a bit about NCAPPS. We are grateful to be funded and supported by the Administration for Community Living, the Medicare and Medicaid Services. These webinars are available to you every month, and they are free and open to the public. On the next slide, we just lay out our goal as a center, which is to promote systems change that make person-centered principles not just an aspiration but a reality in the lives of people across the lifespan. We do that in a number of ways, through targeted technical assistance, through learning collaboratives, and through these webinars, which are our most public-facing NCAPPS activity. On the next couple of slides, I'm just going to run everyone through a few webinar logistics. Connor Bailey, our project coordinator, is going to periodically post these logistics in chat if you need to refer to them or if you need to access any of the links that are here on the slides. Because this is a webinar and there are many people on, everyone is muted. However, we encourage you to use chat to communicate with us and with each other throughout the webinar. We will have a question and answer period toward the end of the webinar. So if you type questions into chat about any of the content, if you have any questions for the presenters, we should be able to get to a good number at the end. This webinar is currently being captioned in both English and Spanish. The English language captions should be available to you by clicking on the closed caption link at the bottom of the Zoom page. And if you'd like to access the real-time Spanish language captions, you can do so by clicking on the link on your screen, which is also in chat. We will have a few polls, I think just one poll during the webinar, which is coming up just in a moment, and then at the end, we'll pull up some additional polls for the evaluation questions, so please do be prepared to interact. Next slide, Connor. Do feel free to email us. Our email is here. It's ncapps@hsri.org if you have any feedback or questions or would just like to get in touch, or if you'd like to join our mailing list. And also know that this webinar is being recorded and that we will supply the recording, a PDF version of the slides, a plain language summary, the Spanish language transcript, and maybe some other goodies on our website within a few weeks. Our website is ncapps.acl.gov. So next, let's bring up that first poll. I would like to know who is on the webinar today. So Connor, can you bring up the first poll? And we'll give folks a little while to select. Please select all that apply in what roles you self-identify, be that a person who uses long-term services and supports, a family member, loved one, self-advocate, social worker, counselor, care manager, researcher, analyst, community-based provider, government employee, hospital or a clinic employee, a managed care organization employee, or a tribal Indian health service employee. So we'll give folks about 10 seconds to respond to that poll. Okay, and Connor, you want to pull up the results? All right, so great. Thanks to everybody who responded. It looks like the largest share of folks on the webinar today are in a social worker, are social workers, or in a counselor or care manager role. Welcome. We have a good number of folks who are government employees, a good number who are community-based organization employees, a good number of family members, and a few others sprinkled in the other categories. Thanks for that information. It's nice for us to know so we can tailor our remarks and make sure we're speaking to our audience. All right, so I'm just very pleased to be introducing our speakers. First, you'll hear from Silvana Momik. She's CEO of Plumtree Australia and has 28 years experience in the early childhood intervention field. She's the co-creator of Now and Next, promotes peer work, and has incubated 2 new peer-led organizations. She's currently finishing up her PhD on individualized funding and supports her son to self-manage his funding. Next, we'll hear from Dr. Anik Jansen. She's based in New Zealand, and she's a clinical psychologist and researcher. She's interested in changing the disability sector through family collective leadership. Anik co-founded the evidence-based Now and Next, which is a positive parenting program in Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and Europe. And she raises a young adult with special gifts. Mohammed Husseini is next. His or family consists of a very supportive wife and 3 amazing children. They're born in India. They chose New Zealand as their home, and their second child was diagnosed with the autism spectrum disorder a couple of years ago. They were one of the first families to be enrolled in Now and Next in New Zealand. Mohammed works as an architect, and he and his wife are trained as Now and Next peer facilitators. After that, we will hear from Gareth Williams in Canada. He's currently the Director of Family and Children's Services at Kinsight Community Society and is interested in finding new ways to enhance family engagement and build family leadership in the early childhood intervention sector. And finally, we'll hear from Clayton Buffoni. He has a diverse past as a stage writer and a director in the UK, a journalist in the Middle East, and a national business development manager in the Australian and New Zealand wine industry. He's currently the business development consultant for Plumtree Learning, and he's one part of a neurodivergent family of 3 and a member of the Reframing Disability Board and Now and Next alum. So we're really pleased to have this international panel of speakers, and I will now turn things over to Silvana.
And introduction there, and wow, what a wonderful opportunity this is to be speaking with all of you in the United States of America. Really excited on behalf of all of us. Thank you for the opportunity. As you've just introduced, I'm Silvana. I'm also mum of Corinne, who's just coming on 30. And we developed this program called Now and Next, which has ended up being much bigger than a program and has sort of become over time, the last 5 years, more of an approach of including family voice in new ways in early childhood intervention. The context in which we developed the program was really in the lead up to the National Disability Insurance Scheme. So now in Australia, we have a national approach to disability funding and supports, and it's an individualised approach. And the lead up to that, we were really looking at ways to develop the capacity of families to be able to manage negotiating and navigating and working within an individualised funding approach for their children who have delays or disabilities in their families. So this is an Australian context, but as you'll hear as we go through the webinar today, there's a lot of applicability internationally with the work that we've been doing, and we hope that you're interested. Thanks for joining in today. This is just a sort of a bit of a snapshot in the beginning so that I can just give you a little bit of an orientation, and then I'll introduce you and I'll facilitate a little bit of an interview style conversation with my fellow panelists. We've co-designed this work with families. It was using a participatory action research approach that we've also done some research, and my colleague Dr. Nick Jansen will talk a little bit about that. As I said, this is a program that we've developed specifically for families of very little children. So I think internationally there's been a lot of interest in individualized funding. However, the approach has sort of very much been adult-centric, and the work that we've done in terms of building the capability of families has really been targeted at that age group, birth to 8 years old, which we work with. But again, Anik will talk a little bit about some pilots that we've been trialing with older children and their families as well. And I know that NCAPPS is a wonderful organisation that's working to promote person-centeredness. So I just wanted to draw the parallel that in early childhood intervention, the equivalent of person-centered is also family-centered. And whilst there is significantly an important focus on the child, in the early years, it's the family who are the main decision makers for the child. They'll make decisions about the quality of their child's life. They'll also make decisions about how individual funding is spent. And so
I'm sorry to interrupt you. If you could, we're getting a few notes that people are having a bit of a trouble hearing you. I think if you make the microphone just a bit closer and speak a bit slower, it'll be better.
Okay, I'm not sure if that helps. I'll try to work out my volume in a moment. Okay, so I was just saying that family-centered is really where we're at with early childhood intervention, because it's the family that are making the most of the decisions for their child, both in terms of the quality of the decisions, in terms of day-to-day decision-making for their child. Often families, until their child is 18, are making a lot of those decisions. And there's a slide as we come up where I'll explain that a little bit more. But especially in the beginning, in early childhood intervention, it's families who are spending the funding and making purchasing decisions. And so this approach is really about building the family's understanding about what to aim for, about how to identify their goals, about knowing where to head to so that they can have as independent as possible adults once they've done their parenting job and their children reach 18. Of course, it never really stops. So that's just a little orientation to our work, and I'd like to now just give you a little sense of what the Now and Next program is about, and we'll talk about that, and then a couple of other resources, and then over to our IT to hook up the video. Oh, not the video yet. I'm not sure why that didn't happen. Yes, that's correct.
I have a story to tell you.
Meron akong kwento para sa'yo.
我同你講一個故事啊。When my daughter was born, they called us in.
After the diagnosis, the doctor said
my son would not walk.
They said she may not talk.
That our life was going to be really challenging.
I felt completely overwhelmed.
We didn't really know where to go, who to listen to, and what steps we needed to take.
I was searching the internet every night.
every single night.
And the more I read, the more my heart sank.
Everyone was telling me what my son couldn't achieve.
But then I joined a program called Now and Next.
As parents, we imagined what would have helped us when our children were little. So we developed Now and Next.
We wanted to give families hope for a future with possibilities.
But we also wanted to ensure that the program was robust and evidence-based.
So we turned to positive psychology. First, the families develop goals, and then the strategies to achieve them.
We give families the tools to build on their strengths so that they understand what to do to help their child thrive and progress.
During the program, I learned skills that helped me achieve the best outcomes for my son.
I learned how to work with our supports and therapists to achieve what's best for my son.
We had the space, the time, and the permission to work out what we wanted as a couple and how we could achieve that.
The biggest lesson I learned was that looking after myself and the other people in my family helped our daughter too.
We came to believe that our children have a lot of strengths.
And that we had the ability to change their futures.
Together, as a network of parents,
we grew stronger.
Lumakas kami.
我哋成家都安心啲。
I looked at my parent facilitator and the other parents in the room, and I thought, if they can do this, I can too. By the end of the course, I thought to myself, I've got this. I've got this.
We've got this.
I've got this.
Hi, Connor. Just Silvana, again, if you could go back one slide, I think it is where we have some circles to explain what happens in the Now Next program. Fantastic. Well, the Now Next program is a series of 8 2.5 sessions. In those sessions each week, it is a parent-led program. It's run by a parent facilitator. The facilitator is not necessarily presenting, but they're facilitating an adult learning opportunity for the families of children with disability who are joining in the program. Each of the programs are set up in a way so that families are doing most of the work themselves. It's sort of group work and sharing and talking with one another. And so what happens is we cover each week some different topics from looking at predictability, which is setting a vision for their child and family, setting a family goal, setting a child goal, setting a personal goal, and that's very unique, because for those of you who work with early childhood and the families of children with disabilities, the goals that families set are for many, many years pretty much heavily focused on their child goal, leaving family goals and personal goals to the side, and that's obviously got significant consequences for families' situations as their child grows older. So we start the program with really orientating the families to the importance of family and personal goals in addition to their child goals. We run through a number of different activities with the family rooted in positive psychology, such as helping them to find their signature strengths, activities which focus on increasing their agency. And the idea is working with professionals, bringing all of those skills and working really sort of confidently and growing their capabilities to work confidently in partnership with professionals. And at the end of the program, we leave families with what we believe is a toolkit for some new skills that they've got in being able to both understand where to go with their child's development and their family's future, but also giving them some skills that they're going to be able to, and some tools that they're going to be able to practice in the years to come. In those everyday opportunities, such as working with childcare or schools, or working with the many professionals that often families are working with to support their child's development. So that's a little overview of what happens in the 8 weeks of the program. Thanks, Connor. We'll get you to move through to the next slide. Great. So the program really starts in week 1 with what can also be a standalone activity, and we call this activity Predictability. It's a resource that we developed ourselves. We co-designed with families, and that's been through quite a few different versions. The point of this little set Predictability is to help families to set a vision for their son or daughter, but also their whole family and for themselves. And it takes between sort of half an hour to an hour and a half. It depends on how long each family takes in this process. And the idea here is to really challenge the assumption that when we ask families to develop goals, in meetings for their son or daughter, that's usually done in an interview style approach where we've got an agenda and we're asking families questions about, what are your goals for your child? And often as a parent, Anik and I reflected to ourselves that when my son left high school, for example, one first thing that I said was, I never wanted to do an individual education plan meeting again. I hated them. They were so disempowering. They never included my son. And they were really just a a very mostly unhappy experience, an unsatisfying experience where I felt like I was being taken through the process that other people wanted our family to go through. And so we designed this opportunity to set a vision as really being something that families participated in, that this was really their process, their thinking, their activity, rather than being guided by a meeting style individual education plan. So we'll go over to now the video to give you a little idea about what this is.
Life. Sometimes it doesn't go to plan, especially when you're the parent or carer of a child with a delay or disability. You seem to always be on the go, but left wondering if you're actually getting anywhere. What if we told you, you don't have to feel like this? Pictability allows you to catch your breath. Have a play, follow the steps, take your time. By the end, you'll be reconnected with what's important to you, your child, and your family without even realizing it. That's just how Pictability works. Pictability helps you turn what's important into what's achievable. What's achievable then turns into a map for a great life, your family's life. And before you know it, you're on your way.
So welcome back. I hope you enjoyed those two short videos, and I hope they've given you a little bit of an orientation about what this program Now and Next is like for families, and just there you saw a little bit of a snapshot of what the Pictability vision setting is like. In that session, families formulate their long-term goals. They also prioritize 3 goals, one for their child, one for their family, and one for themselves. Families learn then to bring about, their expert, to prioritize and appreciate and utilize their expertise that they have about their child in the context of this Pictability session, and then be able to use that when they're working with professionals. So getting them clear in their head about what it is that is important for their family, and then being able to use that to guide planning in early childhood settings and schools, or in their work with professionals such as therapists and educators and others, or to be able to utilize that vision that they have for their child and family, to be able to guide the community activities that they might want to be accessing and helping their child to access, such as the local swimming club or the soccer group and those kind of things. So the idea is to get families' collaboration ready in the program so that they're able to go out with a new sense of direction, and also capability and skills to be able to get some of those things happening for their son or daughter and for their whole family as well. Okay. Our next slide just gives you a sense of how we really envisage. It's a model of how we envisage that families support their son or daughter. On the left-hand side, you'll see, when your children are little and they've just been born, that left-hand triangle, which starts with a very wide base, you're coaching your family, your child to make choices. And, when they're very little, the child triangle is on the right-hand side. When they're little, we tend to make, as parents, more of the decisions for their children. And we're supporting and encouraging our little children to make choices that are appropriate to their age. But as children get older, they are making more of the decisions, as you can see in the top triangle. Now they have the bigger, real estate of the triangle, and they're independent and in control. That's where we want our children to be by the time that they're 18 or approaching their 18. Some children take longer, others do it much more quickly. It's sort of really child and family circumstance, very individual. But the idea of these two inverted triangles is to really show how a lot needs to happen and can happen, it should happen in those very early years, and that a lot of that responsibility lies with the family themselves. And right now in Australia, I can't say for the United States, but right now in Australia, there's not much structured, strategic approach to building the capability of the family, so that they can actually build the capability and independence of their son or daughter. And the whole approach of Now and Next is really about helping the family to understand they are the ones that make the difference. And we want them to learn the skills by knowing where to be headed right from the start, and to get the support not only from professionals but also from other families, so they can do this by themselves with the support of other peer networks and peer help and support, but also then work in partnership with professionals to get this independent young adult happening as their child approaches 18. So I think we have one more slide from me, and then I'll hand over to my colleague Anik Jansen. So this just gives you a little snapshot of how long we've been going. We started developing and co-designing. We piloted the Now and Next program in 2015. It originally started off as a one-to-one service, but then we quickly realized that what we needed to do was to bring families together so that they were feeling less isolated, supporting one another, connecting one another, and feeling the power of peer connection. We started training peer workers, and in 2018 we've developed international hubs in New Zealand. We've got one of our guests is from New Zealand today, and he will talk a little bit about that. We've also started running the Now and Next program online, and the really encouraging thing is that online data is comparable to the face-to-face data. And most recently, we've started working to train facilitators of the Now and Next program online. So that just gives you a little snapshot, and over the last 5 years, that's sort of really been our passion. And I'd like to introduce now Dr. Anik Jansen, my colleague and co-creator of the Now and Next program, and she'll take you through some of the research components of the program.
Thank you, Silvana. Hello from New Zealand to everyone. As the research director for this program, I'm happy to welcome the, I think, 6% of research colleagues on this webinar, but I think that what I'm going to try and do is give you an orientation of the research that would appear, be interesting to everyone. So if it's just the researchers, we could go on forever on our results. So I'm going to try and contain myself. The first graphic that I put in this presentation is just an illustration to give a brief overview from above of our activity. So this is what we call our theory of change. And on the bottom, we have our basis, where we stem from. And that is our theoretical background: positive psychology, family leadership, strength-based approach, gamification, you've just seen some movies about that, and family-centered practice. Just again to reiterate what Silvana was saying earlier, for families raising young children, we talk about family-centered practice as the equivalent of what people working with adults with disability talk about person-centered. This is because when a child is very young, the person that you're working with is the parent. Just wanted to clarify that again. If you look at the top of this visual, you see that the aim and the outcome that we're looking for is to build family capability through more participation. There is growing theoretical evidence to point to the fact that it is very important for professionals and parents to have good collaborations when the child is very, very young. Of course, what Silvana was referring to before with the inverted triangle is that the voice of the parents recedes in the background as the voice of the child growing up becomes stronger, and as the child becomes more independent. And so we are conscious of that. We're just looking at that first stage. And so if you look on the right-hand side, you see how our progression from the evidence base to engagement, training, expanding, sustaining, and evaluating comes towards these outcomes that we want. Then we have at the level of the engagement, we have 3 columns. The one to the right is family who participates. So we first and foremost train families, and as my colleagues later will say, these families are trained by peer workers. I'll get to that in a moment, but our first point of call is the families themselves. They are in group sessions, and they have, this is a learning program. We're very clear about the fact that this is not a therapy, and it's also not a support group as in a coffee group. So the difference with what we do and what others do is, and the support group is that we have, based on positive psychology, we have a curriculum, which is what Silvana was talking about, what happens at each session. And we are evidence-based. So everything we do is informed by evidence and also feeds into evidence. So we collect data, which I will show you in my next slide, in real time during programs. So back to what we can see on the visual here, the column on the right, the green column on the right-hand side talks about the voyage of the families. They first participate as in the Now and Next program, and then there's family workshops, and then they become a part of an alumni group of parents. In the middle group, we have something that we are very proud of to be contributing to the disability sector, and that is how we train peer leaders. So when a family does the program, when they finish the program, they could do one of 2 things. They could say, well, great, I've had this program, I'm now going to use it with my family and carry on with it. But there's a group of people who come to us, and we also sometimes shoulder tap, because we have a way to identify these peer workers. We have matrices, but we also say that some people during these groups are so awesome that they really could train their other parents. They could become peer workers, peer facilitators, and carry on this those workshops locally. Ultimately, the aim of our program is not for us to go around the world and do all these workshops. It's to do one workshop in one country and then build on that local capability. So this is what we call a hub, and we're going to get back to it afterwards. But in this process of training peer workers, we identified these family leaders as peer workers, we trained them, and they become part of a peer workforce, which has its own little network as well. So all of that would not be as effective if we didn't bring the professionals along with us. And this is what the left-hand side column is. It's about involving the practitioners as soon as possible, training, showing them what our system can do when we do pictability, we do a vision for the family. I speak to a lot of practitioners who tell me, when I do a meeting with the family, it's sometimes so hard to make the family bring up really authentic goals, and sometimes I actually have to do it. I don't know, I'd love to hear from the audience whether you feel that when you have a vision setting, a goal setting session with families, you sometimes feel that you have to sort of probe, give inspiration to the family. Please just let us know in the chat window. I'm curious. I have seen a lot of that. So we want to bring the professionals along with us, and we want to create new partnerships. Traditionally, it has been the responsibility of the professionals to create these partnerships. That's written in all our documentation. I'm a clinical psychologist too, in my previous lifetime, and I know that this was what was required of me. This doesn't come easy necessarily to everyone, and also a real partnership, if it's not equally shared, is not really an equal partnership. So I see that Larissa said, yes, sometimes we give families ideas. So so what we want to do is we give the professionals an experience of what Pictability could look like. We give them an experience of what now&next program could look like. And we want, what our message to them is, the program will bring back the families to you collaboration ready, goal ready. And this is an important specific feature of our program. So along progressing up, we carry on training, and they form their own community of practice. All of these lead to what we call collective benefit mindset. So the collective benefit mindset is what we talked about before when we say it's not only about the well-being of my family, but it's about what I can contribute to the rest of my community. So as the evaluation progresses, these are the things that we evaluate. We have a qualitative and quantitative evaluation of family empowerment, family setting a vision for their child, their family and self, the goal achievement, the impact on agency, hope, and well-being. So I think I'm ready to move on to the next slide. We have a lot of data, but I just want to share with you one thing, one element of our research results, because I know from having been in long meetings that sometimes people walk away with one main idea. So here's the main idea. What is not written here is the goals of the participants. So we get participants to achieve something like 90 to 97% of their goals, the goals that they delineate at the first sessions. And then these are 4 variables that we measure: well-being, empowerment, hope, and program impact. So in blue in this graph, you see the pre-measures. We measure these pre and post programs. So the before is for all of them is in blue. The after for all of them is in orange, and the broken line is the maximum value for that specific variable. So well-being has a maximum of 12. So you see that for the participant, and this is based on our global scores, the last time we did a global evaluation. So really what this shows us is between the before and after of the program, participants grow 25% in well-being, 21% in empowerment, 20% in hope, and 32% in how they value the program impact. I think that's all I will say for this now, because there's too much data. Connor, can you just go back one sec to the previous slide, because I forgot to say something, the previous one. So this we will also give you add this as a PDF in the resources of the webinar. And what you see, those little numbers in the boxes, these show the publications or the presentations that we've done already in that domain. So there is, for instance, 2 publications that we've done on the collective benefit mindset. For instance, that one of them was how the hub started in New Zealand by identifying the people who wanted to go forward and be trained as peer facilitators. So we collected the data at that stage, and we wrote an article about that. So you will have this theory of change in your resources, and the PDF is an interactive PDF. So if you click on any one of these boxes, it'll take you to a website with much more information. So this is just the top level of the information. Thank you, Connor. We now move 2 slides. One more, yeah. So So I asked one of our group participants, so her name is Jackie Pasternak, that's one of the mother who graduated from the program. She's a graphic illustrator, and I asked her, how would you represent what happened to you and to participants during the program? So this is how she chose to represent it, and I just want to give you a few words around this illustration. So the first thing that we see here is two words on the left, bottom and top, and it's prospect and flourish. So prospection is an important concept in the positive psychology development, and that is about envisaging the future with hope. So that is what we start doing right from the first minute with Pictability. And flourish has to do with what I want myself and my family and my child to accomplish. That's on the long term, we want the benefit of having more well-being. So in the space rocket, we have the exercises that we do during Now and Next program, which are, as I mentioned before, are evidence-based. So building agency, identifying your signature strength, identify the well-being practices, which are acronym is PERMA. So it's positive emotion, engagement, relationships, meaning, and achievement. So people are in a spaceship traveling together. And I know that this metaphor of the voyage is slightly overused, but we felt here that, she feels here that sky is the limit. So she wants to be in that kind of voyage. And basically along the way, there is what happens when there is peer network growing, that they form partnership with professionals that they feel are different, and that there are other benefits from the program. I think that's it for this. Yep. So the last slide that I have here is, how do we place our activity more higher up in the realm of what the current development, the theoretical development. Dr. Peggy Kern, who's referenced, the paper is referenced here, is talking about system-informed positive psychology framework. So we all work within a system, and we need to make sure that all parts of the system actually move together. So practically speaking, for us, it means it's not enough for the parents to be more empowered and more positive and setting goals about their children. Really need the professionals to come along with us. We also need the funding models to be to appropriate, follow the parents' new agency. And we need to value different perspectives. So all of these parts here are parts of the system-informed positive psychology. If anyone is interested in carrying on with a model that is connecting system to this kind of approach to positive psychology, please contact me. And then I'd love to carry on this discussion offline. Silvana? Oh, sorry, there's one more slide. The next slide is, Silvana mentioned that we do work with parents of older children. So in last year, I piloted in New Zealand a program that draws from Now and Next experience, but for older children. So we had a New Zealand high school pilot, and we are planning expansion with Australia in primary and high school interventions in school. These interventions will have, those programs will have the parents and the teachers sitting at the same time at the table learning about these principles. So the schools that we talk to are happy to make space for their teachers to actually sit with the parents and learn about this, so that the goals of the child. So now we're talking more seriously about bringing the child voice into the IEPs. So that this happens, parents are coaching their children to increase their voice and to make choices. And the parents and the teachers are really collaborating now. We can see it because they're in session together and they're talking. And going back to what we were saying before about systems, I know that during IEP, somebody wrote earlier what IEP means as P being a prison. I was noticing in the chat line, and I think that what is one of the system part that is missing at the moment is for schools as well to be able to connect better to the parents and the children, so that the children's goals are really reflected in the IEPs, and they're not just parachuted at the last minute. So there is a little movie in there, which when you get the presentation, you can click on it and see what the children and the educators said during this this pilot. It was extremely well received, and we're looking forward to developing this. If any one of you know schools that want to pilot a program like this, once again, get back in touch with me after this webinar. Silvana, over to you.
Bevan, I wonder if you could just give me a wave if you think that you can hear me well enough. We've got a lot of feedback that the sound quality wasn't great. And yes, hello, America. I'm so sorry. I was so excited and I was talking so fast. I'll try my best to now slow down now that I've settled in a little bit. Wow, what great questions there are and comments in the chat, and I've been reading too, Anik, and what I've really noticed there was a lot of energy around, you know, the challenge of goal setting with families or with even children. I mean, ultimately, as I said in my little intro, you know, my son was never involved in his educational planning meetings at school, let alone in early childhood. And it wasn't until he left high school that when we sat around the kitchen table to plan how he was going to use his individual funding, that actually the thought occurred to me, why did I wait till my son was 18 until I brought him into the planning? And this is why we're working with families to really investigate and explore, develop new ways to creatively help them to set goals, but also now we're moving in towards supporting the families to coach their children, to expect their children to be able to contribute in some way, regardless of the level of disability that they have, in some way to contribute to planning about their lives. And that, as that little inverted triangles slide showed you, you know, that could be something very simple in the early years, such as, do you want to wear these pajamas or those pajamas? But teaching children in the very earliest possible times to make choices, teaching families how critical it is, and then moving towards, hopefully, as they get older, more and more choice making and participation in setting of their own goals. I also saw some comments there about, you know, evidence of good outcomes for children being linked to the high expectations that families have of their children. And I think this is really critical. And this is why in the Pictability goal, vision setting exercise, in the toolkit, the first thing that we do is to get families orientated to thinking about their child in a positive way and get them to fill out a little card where they have to put down positives and strengths that their child have. And we hear from families that is an incredibly empowering exercise, because most of the time they're thinking about things that their child can't do. You know, for me, when Karim was little, I was working on dribbling because he was dribbling all the time. Now, guess what? He's 30 and he still dribbles. So I wish someone back then would have helped me to orientate him to his strength back then, which was he wanted to be in front of an audience, and you know, he wanted to entertain people and he wanted to connect with people, and now he's a non-speaking motivational speaker. And you know, that would have been an awesome thing for someone to direct me to finding his strength when he was little. It was there, but finding his strength and instructing me to celebrate it, to connect with it, to nurture it, to focus on it with all my might, rather than focusing on some of those skills which are necessary. Eat, drink, walk, talk. They're necessary. I'm not saying that they're not, but at some point as parents, we lose sight of celebrating who our children are. And we focus on a lot of developmental goals. And my point with my son's dribbling was that sometimes those developmental goals aren't going to make much difference in terms of progress. And so what else are we doing with our children? You know, who are they? Do we know who they are? And are we sharing with others who our children are, so that they can, as Anik said, grow up to thrive and flourish? I also love some of the comments in the chat box around hope. And that's incredibly powerful. You know, we all need hope to believe that our children are going to have a wonderful future, but we need more than just hope. We want skills. We want skills so that we know how to do it, because this is our responsibility. We can't do it, of course, alone, but it is the parents that in the family and the other, extended family that are here to, here for the long term, whereas professionals are come and go, and it's important to invest in the family. And one last comment, there was a comment about Australia being very well resourced. So that's not quite the case. I wish it was true, but I think internationally we'd all agree that we all wish that there was more money for early childhood intervention in the field of disability, but we really developed all of this on, let me tell you, it was a total shoestring. And I'd love to chat with people after the webinar if you want to know how we did it and anything like that. I'm happy to chat with you a little more about that. So keep the comments coming in. It's wonderful to hear what you're all thinking. I'd like to just introduce our next speaker, Mohammed from New Zealand. Mohammed, before you get started, it's been a while since you were introduced at the top of the webinar. I'd just like to ask you to say a little bit about yourself, to let the listeners know who you are, a little bit about your family and your background, and then we'll let you get on with your information.
Thank you, Silvana. Hi, everyone. My name is Mohammed. Kia ora, as they say in New Zealand, to welcome everyone. I was born in India, but moved to New Zealand, and we have been here for more than a decade. I'm here with my family, my beautiful wife, Iram, and 3 amazing children. Umar is our second child who has autism spectrum disorder, you get to know more later when I tell you some experience about it, how we get it on the Now and Next program, and how we adapted it, and how it changed my life or our life as a family. So, yes, Silvana.
Mohammed, just tell us when you did the Now and Next program and what was the impact of that on your family?
Yeah, our son was about 2.5 years old when he was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. Soon after the diagnosis was when I could say our family were in depression. We stopped doing many things like socializing, going out as a family, or having fun. As a parent, our focus was not now. Instead, it was what's going to happen when he will be an adult. Who will take care of him? Whether he will ever go to school? Will he have any friends? Questions of those similar kind. This is actually when we came across the Now and Next program, and it was a pilot program in New Zealand. We enrolled in it, and it was a 4-week course. And during that course, we started feeling empowered. We started to find hope in our planning. Our overall well-being improved. And I'll give you some examples around that. So our wild thoughts before, which were like, what's going to happen, started to transform into goals. And we started to work towards our goal, taking small baby steps. So our focus changed from what's going to happen in 20 years to what's going to happen now. If it's happening now, how will it be if we started to measure it? Like an example, our thoughts before were whether my son would ever go to school. We changed that into a goal, and we worked towards it, breaking down into many small goals to make him school ready. We would fail sometime, that's fine, or sometime we would go back and change the strategy and then achieve our goal. So we started to measure our success, and we celebrated, as you said, Silvana and Anik before, we do celebrate our success, and this brings us together. This is when we started to get hope back into our life. This is when we started to feel empowered, and most importantly, we started to have fun as a family. So now, about 2 weeks ago, my son started his school, his mainstream school, and he enjoys it. And we are so proud of him. He's our champ, obviously. So when I reflect back at the days just after diagnosis, this journey would have been difficult, or maybe we could have been in same closure mode. Don't know. But most importantly, Now and Next has changed our life and also changed the way we think about our son. But to add further to that, as Anik mentioned in her talk, like they do pick up the leaders into the program and train them to be peer facilitators. So we were one of the ones who got picked up. Thanks, Anik. So the journey didn't end it on the first course. So me and my wife soon realized how Now and Next program has empowered us with tools and strategies which were helping us moving forward. So we decided to be part of a wonderful team assisting other parents. So we got trained as facilitators for the Now and Next program and collaborated with the Ministry of Education. So we did our first program over there. Thank you, Julie, for the opportunity. She's an amazing mover, and if you ever come down to New Zealand, meet her. She heard about the Now and Next program and wanted to conduct one in the region. The reason I'm mentioning that is the region that the Now and Next program was conducted was a little far away, so we had to take a flight. And that is actually one of our family goals, to take a plane back to India. Now, imagining that's a 16-hour flight, keeping our son in a seat for that long would be a challenge. So we thought this is a good opportunity. Let's see if the plane flight, an hour flight, is feasible enough for him to afford this change. So what we did is we took that as a goal, but before boarding that flight, we achieved many small goals similar to the one which I mentioned a little while ago. Like if he's comfortable on a bus ride, so we took a bus ride. You know, the same concept, a moving capsule with locked doors, with all strangers around you, and then we planned a train ride. Same thing, with this time it's the speed and the motion. And then catch a plane. So little achievements towards a goal to travel together as a family on a plane, right, was giving us confidence and giving us hope. Giving us hope for us to say that he will be fine on the plane. And strangely, he was amazing. He enjoyed the plane ride all the way, and that gave us confidence. So that Now and Next program that we did, the first one in New Zealand, that actually changed our life. Thank you, Silvana.
Mohammed, could you just tell us a little bit about your experiences as a peer facilitator? So if you listeners remember back to the theory of change, there were 3 columns that who we're working with. We work with the parents, we work with who are doing the program. We identify, as Mohammed, you've noted, peer leaders, and then we train them to become a peer workforce so that they can not only develop, run the Now and Next program locally, but they can also do other forms of peer work as well. And then we also work with professionals. So I guess your experience described how you went from a parent doing the Now and Next program to being identified as potentially a peer facilitator, and you received some training. I wonder if you could just tell us a little bit about your and Eram experience of being, being a peer facilitator.
It was amazing to start with because we soon realized that the tools that we have, that we are using the tools in our life to work with our son, were actually working. It was not a theory thing. And again, the advantage of this was, like, we were working together. Me and my wife were working together, and we were speaking the same language as to what the goals are, what would be the short-term goal, how would it look like, how would it measure. So we're measuring things at a time, and we will go back to strategy and to say, look, this wouldn't work. We can go back and change it. But keeping track onto the peer leaders, the other sessions that we did around in New Zealand, we also picked up peer leaders around there, and we had and my wife Iram, she organized about like 9 sessions last year, which were about yoga sessions. These yoga sessions, legal advice sessions, be the CEO of your IEP meetings, transitioning to schools. These are all led, managed by parents. So that's an amazing achievement to say that you pick up leadership amongst the group from the parents. Yes, Alwana.
And so, Mohammed, just on the last slide there, before we move on to Gareth, just wanting to note that we've used the word hub, and we use that as a term to describe a region where there are some peer facilitators trained, so that there are some peer connections that can be made through the peer facilitator and the Now and Next program. Do you want to just say anything in conclusion in terms of setting up the New Zealand hub in your region?
Sure. So where I come from is from Hamilton here in New Zealand. There's a lovely center called McKinsey Center, which has obtained funding to run Now and Next program for the next 3 years, which includes the evaluation program and impact. They are committed to nurture the formation of an alumni group, which is called the Family Empowering Families, which includes parents supporting other parents. So part of that program, we did conducted some courses around last year, like I mentioned before, like yoga sessions, which were led by the parents, legal advice sessions, and so on. But these sessions were set in a way that the parents who have been alumni of the Now and Next, they come together and they share their experience. They talk about what's happening with their and it's where it's like the hub, I think, that created the Family Empowering Families. So these 90 parents got together and shared their learning in awesome ways. This is not a new service that's been said. This is the parent collective impact spreading.
Thank you, Mohammed. It's time to introduce our next panelist, Gareth. Gareth, hello, up there in Canada from Australia. Gareth, I'd just like to ask you to say a few words about yourself, because it's been a while since you were introduced. And Gareth, lovely to see your face. Welcome to the panel.
Thank you. So my name is Gareth Williams. I'm the Director of Family and Children Services here at Kinsight. So we work in a suburb community out of Vancouver on the West Coast, for those in the US and other parts of Canada that are part of this webinar. So, and I'm delighted to actually be here today, and delighted to talk about the experience that Kinsight and families that receive support and services from Kinsight have had regarding Now and Next and the use of Pictability. So I see one of the things that's asked is, what the program can contribute to a service provider. So just as a brief summary, Kinsight provides services and supports to families, basically young children, youth, adults, and their families with developmental disabilities. So we span the kind of from birth to seniors. We offer a range of programming, in-home, preschool, therapy services, all the way up to housing, employment, etc. And I think one of the things from an organizational perspective that we see chronically as kids age and move through the years and into their young adulthood, that families tend to be less involved, that a lot of the planning, that a lot of the work gets handed off to organizations. And then as adults with developmental disabilities get older and some tough decisions need to be made, families are really missing. And we end up spending a considerable amount of time and energy trying to re-engage. And I think one of the beautiful things about Now and Next, and about developing a leadership versus a family support model, is that families are engaged and parents and siblings are engaged over time. So that work that gets done in the early years is continued through and through adulthood. So I think just from a basic service provider, I understand that there are a number of people on the webinar that work with adults only. When you think about how does this affect the work that I do, I'm going to suggest that actually it's a very powerful way to have families continue to be engaged, and to have siblings of children with developmental disabilities to stay engaged as they get older. So I think that's a really key piece. The other thing for us as a service provider is that what we've noticed in just our brief tenure with Now and Next, and we're 3/8 of the way through our second session, but our first session delivered by our own peer workers who took part last spring, is that connection between what a family wants, what a parent wants, and what a professional is trying to provide is much stronger in a lot of cases. you know, very often we hear about, in conversations with professionals, about families seem to be not on board, they seem to be disengaged, etc. And those roots really are, or that feeling by professionals is really rooted, I think, in the initial planning stages. So very often we're very text-based, we have lots of forms, we have lots of consents to sign. And I think what Pictability together with Now and Next provides is a really kind of breakthrough methodology for families to actually, and parents in particular, to actually use not only their own language. So you can see in some of the material on the vision board is that somebody actually was able to write in their own language that they speak at home. So in terms of it being powerful and being the parent's goal versus the professional goal, I think really stands out when you actually have a look at the slide itself. And on the right-hand side, you'll see a delightful parent who actually wrote her goals in Spanish. Now, typically in our whole service planning process, we write goals in English because they sit in a file, they sit with us. But here we actually had the opportunity to really see it come on board and really see people embrace goals for themselves, their family, and their children, partly because they get to write it in their own language and they get to experience it themselves. So, yeah. I'm wondering, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah,
Jenny.
Gareth, next slide. Yes, next slide, Gareth.
So one of the things we did at Kinsight before we engaged in Now and Next is we had the whole, so it says FSC, and I apologize for the acronym, but that's Family and Children's Services. So that's one of the departments at Kinsight. We had the whole department go through the training and the use of Pictability, and we recognized that it was unique and different and not like our typical planning processes that we use with families. And some of the, and of course this being evidence-based, even the training and Pictability with staff is evidence-based. Thank you, Anik. And you know, we saw immediately that there were real differences in staff perceptions and approaches to using Pictability versus our traditional methods. And so what we saw was a real change in staff's hopefulness and participation in the new approach. And so there was some really good data to show that people realized that our regular planning processes, quite frankly, were terrible and they sucked. And so this was a different way to look at it. And I think we've had some real gains in this regard. I'll be honest, the challenges, there are challenges, and you can see on the slide about how do you actually bring something like Now and Next and Pictability into your current delivery system. How do you ensure that staff are using it appropriately and maintaining the fidelity of the tools that have been provided? And we've had some circumstances where we've had to coach and mentor some of the staff around how they're constructing and how they actually use the tools. And then how do you get staff to incorporate those goals more fully into the service plan or the support plan, as we call it. So those are still some outstanding challenges that we continue to work with, but I think we're going in the right direction. So
yeah, Gareth, I run an organization as well, so I can really appreciate some of the challenges that you have referred to. It's been really exciting for us to see the positive impact on families, but that's wonderful, but it's only one part of the story. How do we embed these programs or these approaches into an organization? Shifting staff values or organizational practices is not an easy thing. Can you give us a little insight into how you might, what you might be thinking could make a change there?
Well, if you'd asked me a couple of weeks ago, I would have had quite a different answer. But based on the video conference we had last week, I'm beginning to drink the Kool-Aid of Tim Moore, and thinking that we just need to have a separate system and have, really look at this from the perspective of the peers are going to teach us about how to do this work rather than us actually work and teach families. And I think for me, that was a bit of an aha moment and a bit of a kind of the light bulb turned on for me. And I thought, yes. And so this is about true partnerships and how families are actually going to help us step into this work more fully. So one of the things we're looking at is in terms of when. So we have a number of programs and services for which we have a wait list. And so is this an opportunity to use something like Pictability and Now and Next as some type of intervention while families are waiting for a particular service or a particular program of support, so that they're not only can they do something right away after the program or tonight after they have a session, but they are also able to be ready and be able to match what they want to have happen with what the professional is deciding. So yeah, so those are some examples, Savannah. I hope I've answered the question.
Thanks, Gareth. And just before we move on to introducing our last speaker, Clayton, before we go to a Q&A session in 5 or so minutes, do you want to tell us, the audience a little bit about launching a Vancouver hub of peer facilitators to run the Now Next program with you locally?
Yeah, so we're very excited. Like I said earlier in the slides, that we're actually just completed our 3rd of 8 sessions of our first program that's being run by peers. So we have 2 people that took part in the spring when Anik and a couple of parent peers from Plumtree came over, and over a course of about 4 weeks, so kind of a very intensive 4 weeks, 4 Saturdays, delivered the Now and Next. And from there, we were able to highlight and talk to a couple of parents who we thought would be able to run a session. And so they were part of the online training with Sylvana's organization, and a peer, not only a peer worker, but I think a peer trainer is probably the best way to describe Nicole. And she's really been helpful in helping our 2 parents work through the mechanics and the deliverables. And so we're actually quite blessed with the fact that we have these 2 parents that are delivering, and I think it's going particularly well. You know, it'd be interesting to see where we go. We're experimenting with times and conditions. So I think one of the things that we have done this time is we have a morning session midweek, and that has resulted in a different kind of complement of people who come. We're still quite diverse linguistically and language-wise, but we actually have fewer dads in the program, unlike we did in the spring when we ran it on Saturday. So I think we're always trying to work out those details. So yeah, I'm wary of time too, Sylvana. So
thanks so much, Gareth. And while you and I have been talking, there have been some great comments, and one of those I quickly saw was, we need more peer mentoring. And I think that was what you described there in that last section, which is families working with other families. And you know, it's not just the families who are the peer facilitators who are running the Now and Next program, but they can go on to do other kinds of mentoring with families. And in our organization, Gareth, our peer facilitators started with facilitating Now and Next, but now our organization utilizes those peer workers in lots of different ways. And I won't go into that, but in your post webinar pack, we'll make sure that we include some research that we did on the use of peer work in our organization, and how we really are excited to share that peer work has got lots of benefits to families of young children with disabilities. So peer mentoring between people who have disabilities is important and necessary. We want to get that peer mentoring happening with parents of young children, so that those who understand, you know, where their child should be, you know, in terms of the best life, hope, empowerment, you know, independence, etc. Getting those families to talk to new families could be an incredibly powerful way to shift, as Mohammed said, the way they're thinking, and, you know, shift them into that mindset of high expectations and hope for a positive future.
yes,
Okay,
absolutely.
well, thanks, Gareth. I'd like to introduce our final speaker, Clayton, who's also a father of a young boy, and also you know, works as a peer worker, and he'll tell himself a little bit more about himself in a moment. Clayton, over to you, and just introduce yourself a little.
I feel like the third string quarterback at the Kansas City Chiefs, who just comes on after the Patrick Mahomes have all done their dazzling work. But I'll try to add just a few little things. You can see in that picture there, my lovely wife and amazing son, Harry. Look, what I'd like to touch on, because we don't have a lot of time, is just on a personal note, I guess when I first came across the Now and Next program, my wife had suggested that we do it together, and she presented it to me as how to learn how to set goals and achieve them. And I basically thought, look, I know about setting goals. I've done it my whole life. I do it in my work. But what I didn't realize, and what I came to learn, was the difference for me between setting goals and having a vision. And I was good at setting goals to achieve, but what was driving the goals, everything seemed to come from what was instilled within the system, which was we look at the deficits, we look at what my son can't do, and we work with fantastic professionals who want to fix that, who want to help. But what happened is you end up looking at the negatives. When you have a vision, as I finally discovered, when you have a vision, those goals are still set, but they're driven by the possibility of such positive outcomes. And it changed our outlook, it changed us as a family. And to me, excuse me, I'm breaking up, goodness. To me, that's what was quite extraordinary about it. The other thing that I learnt on a personal level was doing it as a couple was so essential because, and there's been quite a few questions about dads, etc. As I say, I had some resistance, but I was drawn into it. And what I discovered was that we were on the journey together. We always had been, but I was really very much the passenger. I was there to help. If a tyre needed changing or petrol needed to be put in, I could supply that. But I wasn't setting the direction with my wife together. I was letting her do all of that work. And you need that support, I think. You need to be doing it together as a family. And also, importantly, adding that voice of our son in as early as possible. So that as a family, we're setting our destination and goals. So to me, they were the two main things that I found from doing the program. The third point I'd make is there were questions earlier about resources and Australia being rich in resources. And this was the real eye-opener for me, was to be able to sit back, look at our vision, look at our goals, but actually realize that along with the amazing professionals that we're working with, our team is so much bigger, or our resources are so much bigger. And by this, I mean, we discovered a fabulous team member who is this wonderful 70-year-old Chinese woman called Mary, who runs the local chip shop. Harry, she's very tough with people. She runs a tight ship and she growls at people and keeps them in line. Harry enters the shop and she turns into a lamb. And he has this fantastic connection where he's actually able to order food and hand over money and take the currency. He learnt to say hello and goodbye. This was an amazing tool. We'd never seen anything like it. And we've then, by looking into our community, been able to develop so many resources that are helping to lead him to a rich and rewarding life. The sort of life that our vision wants for him, rather than purely looking back and saying to our poor old professionals, can you fix these things? Can you help us? Instead of saying we're the experts in our child, we're going to help you to understand him as a person rather than as a series of challenges. That's probably it for me, because most things I think have been covered and covered beautifully.
Clayton, Thanks for sharing that. We've had some great comments in terms of appreciating and welcoming the perspective that you and Mohammed have brought as fathers, and indeed that challenge in early childhood intervention for us really focuses on the very small percentage. You know, I think it's like 2 or 3% of fathers are engaged in early childhood intervention, leaving most of that work and that interface as you've described with the partner. So I'm just wondering, do you have a thought on how we can engage fathers more? You know, if they're not coming to Now and Next, perhaps, you know, would they do it online, or are there other ways? I mean, you're a man. What do you think?
Wow, I wish I had the answer. I was straight away thinking beer and football, but it doesn't really fit. I don't know, other than let's accept that fathers want the best for their children, the same way any parent does. So I think it's simply explaining what it is that's on offer. Here's help, and it's really easy to take. And I think it's a matter of getting it across, and the sooner we can move away from a deficit-based model and treat it as a positive and learn positive skills, I think it's the same as for anyone. You're attracted to things that offer hope. So just simply show that it offers hope, and that should, I think, attract any decent human being, father or not.
Thank you, Clayton. I sprung that question on you totally out of the blue. I appreciate you giving some speedy thought to that. So over to our last slide before we end our presentation today. And this is just a sort of a slide that puts together some of snapshots of the international partnerships that we've had. We've worked, of course, as you've heard today, with Gareth, with New Zealand, with Finland, and we've got some potential relationships being set up at the moment with Ireland and Singapore. Clayton, was there anything else that you wanted to add to that particular slide? Sorry,
I don't think there is much that I can add except it speaks for itself, and it is something that is certainly growing. With, you know, we are working on taking it into Ireland and Singapore, and there's a great deal of interest. People want to change; they want to embrace a different approach. So no, it's just fantastic to look at things. To look at a global map without seeing red dots that are talking about coronavirus. Yes.
Clayton, I asked one of our peer facilitators who is a father, Mello, I asked him, you know, when he went to Canada and to Finland, I said, what is it like facilitating the Now Next program in those other countries? Does it work? And I recall his answer to me. He said, Silvana, wherever I am, I feel that families are united by the love that they have for their child, and that does not have any, you know, global boundaries. Wherever families are, as you said, with fathers, we sort of, you know, often assume that perhaps why aren't they engaged? But you've really reminded us, both families more generally, but also fathers, they love their children, they want the best. Let's start from there and move forward. So thank you all for staying on in today's webinar. I'll hand over now to Bevan, but I also wanted to thank our wonderful panel. I really appreciate it. And thank you, listeners, for giving us the opportunity to talk to you today.
Thank you, Silvana and all. I just wanted to say a quick couple of things, and please do type your questions into chat as I'm speaking. About why we invited Silvana, Anik, Mohammed, Clayton, and Gareth here. At NCAPPS, you know, we have a pretty broad scope. We're interested in enhancing person-centered practices across systems, across the lifespan. And for these webinars, we do like to highlight kind of fresh, creative, innovative applications of person-centered principles, and that really is you know, what our impression has been of this work, and so we just wanted to highlight and call people's attention to it. you know, I just want to just make a couple of connections between this work and NCAPPS and what I know everyone on the webinar is passionate about. And that's one, you know, the power of peer mentoring, and not just peer developed or peer provided services, but services that are really from top to bottom, from beginning to end, developed by people who've lived that. And I really think that you all have laid that out beautifully. And then the ways in which the strengths-based approach is really put into action here, I find very exciting. So I just wanted to say that as just to sort of connect the dots for you about why we brought folks from New Zealand and Australia and Canada on to talk about with our US center. That's why I wanted to kind of just give people a taste for some of this innovation. So we did get some great questions coming in, and we'll get to as many as we can in the next couple of minutes. But also know that we will be providing written answers to all of the questions that we didn't get to, and we'll get those up on the website, and we'll email them out to all of these participants as well. A couple of folks have asked if this program also works for children diagnosed with mental illness, mental health conditions. Can folks speak to that?
So Silvana here.
Yep, we hear you.
Great. So we designed the program so that, as I said in the beginning of the webinar, that families do the work. And what we have found as we've been presenting the program, almost 500 families have done the program internationally, is that, you know, we get families trying to edge and squeeze themselves into the program. So families of children, you know, families of who are fostering children. So they're not their natural parents, they're fostering children. Often those children have conditions other than disability. And what we're finding is that the foster family group feel that there's a real sort of potential for a program like this. Again, it's the families who are empowering each other and the families who are working individually for their own goals. So because the program's so self-directed, because a participant's activity in the program is very much directed by their own vision setting experience, then there's absolutely no reason why this couldn't work for children who have mental health issues, and we're sort of pushing the boundaries and testing wider into the future. But that's also a great idea, is that we'd love to test that more formally with children who have mental health issues. But yes, so far I don't know that any other panelists would like to add to that. Just raise your hand.
Or speak up.
Or speak up, yeah.
We've been told time and time again that this approach actually would suit all children. When we brought the program to schools, there were principals who said, well, why should I use this only for children with disability? This is a program about positive education and positive parenting. So we haven't formally, as Silvana said, we haven't formally tested it in other contexts, but we'd love to. Everything we do, we have as I explained to you before, our set of data that we compare to. We have a benchmark. So when we go into a slightly new territory, we always compare back to our benchmark to see whether we have the same level of effectiveness in bringing the parents' we talked about empowerment, well-being, hope. So this would be the criteria that we would be judging, is do we have the same impact as our other groups? Mm-hmm. Nothing prevents us from going into that, but into new fields, but it's just a matter of capacity and how quickly things develop.
And Gareth, you were going to add a comment?
Yeah, thank you, Silvana. I mean, our current running of Now and Next, we have a dad actually who is attending, and in our initial reach out to parents and phone calls, we discovered actually that his child doesn't have a developmental disability, but is involved in the mental health sector, and talked to him about whether this was going to be appropriate. And he literally said, I'm looking for anything, I'm looking to try something. And he has been attending, and he's actually, he's perhaps been less interactive, but he certainly has enjoyed it. He certainly has used the tools And I think it's having an effect, and he's actually appreciated the support that he's got and being included. So I think it can fit, as Anik said, it can fit across many different sectors. I don't think it's just necessarily where you have children with a disability.
Great, great. And we got some comments in chat too that sort of agreed with that or concurred with that. And as somebody who has, when I met up with Anik in Washington, D.C. earlier this year, I actually got the treat of trying out the Pictability exercise, just thinking of my own typically developing son. And it was actually quite eye-opening. And I took home what I'd learned to my partner, and we actually had some really great discussions about parenting. So I can attest to that personally. We have run out of time. I think we could stay on this webinar chatting for quite a while longer, but alas, it is 4:30 Eastern time. Connor, could you put up the evaluation questions, please? We are really, really grateful for Silvana, Anik, Clayton, Gareth, Mohammed for your time, for preparing these resources. And I'm so glad this was recorded, and so glad that we'll be able to post these resources, answers to questions, to wonderful questions that we didn't get to on our website. So stay tuned for that. We'll send everybody a note when those are ready. And I wish all of you a wonderful day for those of us on the other side of the world, and afternoon and evening for those of us in the continental United States. Thanks to all.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.